8 months off the floor, fighting the flu. Benched to start 4 out of 5 games. And she still walked away as the youngest MVP in FIBA qualifying tournament history. Let that sit for a second, because I need you to really feel what that means before we go any further. Not just as a basketball fan, as someone who watches what happens when a player is that good and the system around her still finds ways to slow her down. This is not a story about Caitlin Clark being great. You already know that. Everybody knows that at this point. This is a story about something way more uncomfortable. This is about what happens when the numbers and the coaching decisions are pointing in completely opposite directions and everyone with a platform is too scared to say it out loud. So today we are saying it out loud. If you stay until the end of this video, here is what you are going to find out. You are going to find out why one specific stat from this tournament, not Clark's stat, not Team USA's stat, but a stat measured across every single nation that showed up in Puerto Rico, has only one name at the top. You are going to find out about a coaching situation that nobody in mainstream media is explaining fully or honestly. And you are going to understand why what happened on that island this week is not just a basketball story. It is a preview for the next 2 years of women's basketball, and if you are an Indiana Fever fan, what you are about to hear should genuinely excite you in a way that goes way beyond just being relieved she made it through the tournament healthy. But real quick, before we dive in, everything you're about to hear is based on publicly available information, verified reports, and our own film and data breakdown. This channel has zero affiliation with Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever, or the WNBA. We are not here to pick sides. We are here to go where the data goes. The conversation around Clark touches on some genuinely sensitive territory: race, gender, media power, generational tension inside the league. We respect every player in this story. Our only goal today is to understand what actually happened on that court in Puerto Rico. All right, let's go. Picture this. It is the final game of the tournament. Team USA versus Spain. And Spain, I need you to understand something about this Spanish squad before we go any further, because a lot of people are going to dismiss them, and that would be a serious mistake. Spain came in with Awa Fam, a legitimate top WNBA draft prospect, not a project. A real player who was scoring against elite competition throughout this tournament. They also had Iana Martin, just 20 years old, distributing and defending at a level that had Team USA's starting unit genuinely unsettled. These were not pushovers. These were real players executing a real game plan. And that game plan was built around something called a soft box and one, mixed in with zone rotations throughout the game. Now, if you are not super deep into the X's and O's, here is exactly what that means in plain English. A soft box and one is a defensive scheme designed to do one thing above everything else: identify your opponent's offensive engine and cut her off from the ball as early as possible in every possession. Deny the pass. Force her teammates to make decisions without her. Take away the floor general before the offense can even start. And here is the critical detail about that specific defense. When the floor general is not even on the floor to begin the game, that defense does not need to make a single adjustment. It works automatically. Spain knew Clark was going to be on the bench for the opening tip. They prepared for exactly that scenario. They built their entire game plan around her not being there. And for a while, it worked perfectly. The score kept flipping back and forth through that first quarter. USA would go up, Spain would answer. USA would get a stop. Spain would come right back with something in the paint. The ball movement for Team USA looked heavy and forced. The pace was painfully slow. One commentator described watching Team USA's offense in those early minutes as playing in mud. Nothing was flowing. Nobody could create an advantage at the top of the key. And by the time the second quarter started, it was tied. Tied. Against Team USA, with Kelsey Plum on that roster, with all those names, all that experience, all that talent. and Caitlin Clark was sitting on the bench. Social media was absolutely losing its mind at that point. And not in the typical way where fans are just emotional and overreacting to a slow start. People were asking a completely legitimate basketball question that nobody inside that arena or on the broadcast seemed willing to answer directly. Why is your floor general not on the floor right now? Your offense looks completely stuck. Spain is executing a scheme that was specifically designed to neutralize your best decision maker, and she is sitting on the bench watching it happen. Why? Nobody gave a clean answer. And then Clark checked in. Now I want to be very precise about what happened next, because it gets misread and oversimplified constantly. People talk about it like Clark just started scoring and the momentum shifted. That is not what happened. What changed first, before a single point went on the board, was the entire tempo of the game. Here is what Clark did that nobody else on that roster could do in that specific situation. She positioned herself at half court. Logo range. The kind of range that most players in the world cannot even pretend to threaten from. And that positioning alone forces a defensive coordinator into a decision that has no good answer. If you leave her out there and do not send a defender, she pulls up from the logo. Her percentage on those shots is real enough that you genuinely cannot gamble on her missing. Every coach knows it. You have to respect that shot. If you push a defender all the way out to half court to guard her, your entire defensive structure stretches way beyond its comfort zone. The paint opens up, cutters get free lanes, kick-out threes become available all over the floor. There is no right answer. And Clark does not just understand that intellectually. She hunts it. Every single possession. She is reading where the defense is positioned before it even fully sets. She is making decisions before defenders can react. She is turning that defensive pressure into fast breaks, open looks, and easy buckets for teammates. One source close to the team put it simply after the game, Clark really got the offense going. And she brings a kind of dynamic decision-making to the offensive end that completely changes how the game flows. That is not hype. That is what showed up directly on the scoreboard. Every meaningful scoring run that Team USA put together in that game happened while Clark was on the floor. Every single one. The final score was 84-70. But that number actually undersells how competitive and difficult this game was before Clark took over the tempo. Spain was genuinely good. Pham and Martin are real players. And the fact that Clark came in and made the game manageable is more impressive because of how good Spain was, not less. Now, here is where I need you to really lock in. Because what I am about to lay out is the part that mainstream media is glossing over completely. Let us put 4 facts on the table and just let them sit there. Fact 1. Clark was benched to start 4 out of 5 games in this tournament. Fact 2. Clark played more minutes than any other player on the entire Team USA roster across all 5 games combined. Fact 3. Clark led the entire tournament in plus-minus. Not just Team USA, the entire tournament. Every team, every player, every nation that showed up to compete in Puerto Rico. When Clark was on the floor, Team USA outscored their opponents by a margin that absolutely nobody else in the whole field could come close to. Fact 4. Clark led the entire tournament in efficiency rating. Same scope. Every team, every nation, every individual player. Those 4 facts sitting right next to each other do not add up unless you actually look at what happened every single time she stepped on that court. Now let us add the full stat sheet on top of that. 11.6 points per game across 5 games, 6.4 assists per game, adding up to 32 total assists across the whole tournament. And I need to slow down on that number because 6.4 assists per game at a FIBA qualifying tournament is not a casual achievement. These are international defenses specifically engineered to eliminate passing lanes, deny ball movement, and isolate the playmaker. Averaging over 6 assists in that environment, according to analysts who cover international basketball, is genuinely hard to do. And Clark was doing it coming off the bench, which means fewer early game possessions than a starter gets. less time to build any kind of rhythm or feel for the game, and still finding teammates at that rate every single night. She led Team USA in 2-point field goal percentage. She led Team USA in free throws made and free throws attempted. That last number is worth stopping on because of what it actually reveals about how she was playing. To lead a roster packed with elite WNBA players in free throw attempts means you are absolutely not standing on the wing waiting for someone to find you. You are attacking the paint. You are creating contact. You are forcing defenses into impossible choices on every single possession you touch the ball. That is the profile of an aggressive player who is hunting advantages, not a reserve piece who happened to get hot for a week. And here is one more layer that makes all of this even heavier. This is her second MVP award at a FIBA-sanctioned tournament. The first one came back in 2021 when she led the USA Under-19 team to the title. She has done this before. At a younger age, with less experience and with less pressure on her shoulders. And now she has done it again after 8 months completely off the floor, recovering from injury, stepping back in with experimental lineups around her, and with coaching decisions actively working against her throughout the process. MVP. Youngest in the history of this qualifying tournament. Full stop. Now I have to talk about the coaching situation directly, because this is the part that everybody is dancing carefully around, and I think we just need to be straightforward about what the record shows. This tournament did not begin with Nate Tibbetts as head coach. It started with Lawson in charge. And Lawson's philosophy with Clark, based purely on what was observable on the court, can be summed up in one sentence. Use Clark as an off-ball weapon inside a balanced system, spread the minutes across the roster, and do not allow any one player to dominate the offensive structure. On paper, in a front office meeting, that approach sounds like responsible roster management. You have a deep and talented team. You want everyone contributing. You do not want to become too dependent on one player. But on the floor, it looked like Team USA was voluntarily applying the brakes to their own offense. The conservative rotations, the cautious lineup combinations, Clark watching the opening tip from the bench while opponents found ways to hang around. And then the Spain game arrived. Lawson was not there. Not because of any announced injury, not because of any publicly disclosed reason at all. She had to get back to more important stuff, which is roughly how Tibbetts described it when asked, delivered with the kind of easy humor that somehow made the whole situation feel even more strange and unexplained. Nobody gave a clear accounting of what happened. Lawson was simply gone from the sideline. Tibbetts, who openly joked that he had expected to come down to Puerto Rico essentially as a supporting assistant, on what felt like a working vacation, suddenly found himself holding the keys to the whole operation. And he made different choices. He ran guard-heavy lineups with pace and purpose. He pushed the tempo from the opening minutes. And most critically, he built the offense around Clark initiating at the top of the key, making decisions with the ball in her hands rather than spotting up on the wing and waiting for someone else to create. The results were not subtle, and they were not gradual. Look at the New Zealand game, the one and only game Clark started the entire tournament. She played 23 minutes more than anyone on the team. Paige Bueckers was right alongside her running the offense. Kelsey Plum was spaced on the floor creating room. Team USA did not just win that game. They suffocated New Zealand completely from start to finish. That lineup was so fundamentally difficult to guard because both Clark and Bueckers can score and both of them can pass, meaning every single possession forces the defense into a choice that has no good option. Look at the Italy game where Clark was running pick and roll after pick and roll processing reads before Italy's defense could even begin to react, threading passes to open cutters on the short roll and pushing pace relentlessly in transition off both made baskets and missed shots. Italy had no answer for any of it. Two coaching philosophies. Two completely different realities on the floor. And now the question that Indiana Fever fans absolutely need to be sitting with, the question that matters far beyond anything that happened in Puerto Rico, is this one. Stephanie White has spoken publicly about her preference for a more controlled, slower pace of play. Clark has acknowledged that tension directly. The friction between what the data consistently shows and what certain coaching philosophies prefer is not a brand new storyline for Clark. We just watched it play out live and unfiltered over 5 games in front of the entire basketball world. Puerto Rico handed us a controlled experiment that coaches and analysts will be studying for months. Same player, different system, different results. The numbers do not lie. Now, let us talk about Paige Bueckers, because this might genuinely be the most important part of this entire video when you consider what is coming next. These two walked into Puerto Rico having barely played together at the senior level in any meaningful way. Different professional teams, different offensive systems, different roles throughout their careers. 2 players at the absolute peak of women's basketball, but essentially strangers to each other when it came to actually sharing a court. 5 days later, analysts covering international basketball were calling what they were building together flat out unguardable. And after watching the film, it is genuinely difficult to argue against that. Here is precisely why the 2-man game Clark and Bueckers were running creates a defensive nightmare at any level of basketball. Both of them can score at an elite level, and both of them can pass at an elite level. That sounds straightforward, but what it means in practical terms for any defensive coordinator is that there is no safe choice on any possession that involves both of them at the same time. If the defense collapses on Clark at the top of the key as she comes off a pick and roll, Bueckers is spotting up for a kick-out 3 from someone who absolutely will punish that decision. If the defense tries to stay glued to Bueckers through a screen to eliminate that kick-out option, Clark reads the rotation before it finishes and finds the open cutter moving toward the basket before the defense can recover its position. But what made this combination truly special was the timing and the trust they built. Clark would push pace off a rebound, and Bueckers already knew exactly where to position herself. No hand signal, no verbal call, just pure basketball red. Bueckers would work through a screen, and Clark was already loading the pass before Bueckers had fully cleared the defender. That level of instinctive real-time communication between 2 players operating at this speed normally requires a full season of playing together to develop. Sometimes it takes longer than that. They built it in 5 games in Puerto Rico. And that chemistry does not evaporate when the tournament ends. It travels with both of them to Berlin, 2026 World Cup, where opposing nations will have months of preparation time to build defensive game plans, and where there is still no clean answer for 2 players that intelligent making split-second decisions together at that pace. Now step away from the basketball for just a moment, because I think there is something inside this story that reaches beyond any stat line or tournament result. Think about the full picture of what Clark was navigating at this tournament. 8 months off the floor recovering from a serious injury. Comes back into competition while reportedly battling illness at the same time. Steps into a team environment where the coaching structure was not built to put her in the best position, benched before the opening tip 4 times out of 5. No public complaining, no social media posts about playing time, no pushing for special treatment. She waited. She stayed ready. And every time they put her on that floor, she performed at a level so high that nobody could justify taking her back off. There is something genuinely worth holding on to in that. In a sports world where everyone is broadcasting their frustrations in real time and demanding immediate recognition, Clark's most powerful weapon was never the logo 3 or the no-look pass. It was the complete refusal to let the noise or the circumstances change who she was when she stepped between those lines. She did not silence her doubters by arguing her case. She silenced them by becoming the player that no coaching staff could afford to keep on the bench once the game was actually on the line, even the ones who kept trying. The scoreboard does not carry a narrative. The plus-minus does not have a personal bias. And when you lead the entire field of every competing nation in both of those categories while being benched to start 4 out of 5 games, the story writes itself without anyone's help. All right, I want to hear from you directly. If there has been a Caitlin Clark moment, whether it was something from Puerto Rico this week, from her Iowa days, or from her first fever season that made you physically react, stand up, yell at the screen, whatever, drop a basketball emoji in the comments right now. Let me see exactly how many people are genuinely locked into this story. And the real question I want your honest answer to, do you think Caitlin Clark gets treated fairly by the league, by the media, and by the coaches and decision makers who control her opportunities? There is no predetermined correct answer here. Every perspective is welcome in this comment section. I read everything that comes in, and I do not delete opinions just because they go against the grain. If you have a real take, put it down there. And if you believe the full truth of a story matters more than whatever headline version is easiest to push, make some noise in the comments. Every single comment helps this video reach more fans who deserve to hear the complete picture and not just the surface narrative. Now you know what actually happened in Puerto Rico. The bench paradox that nobody is fully explaining. The stat sheet that only makes sense when you understand what was really happening on that floor every time she stepped on it. The coaching situation that raised real questions about philosophy and priorities. And the chemistry that Clark and Bueckers built together in 5 days, something that international defenses, preparing for Berlin in 2026, are going to have a very serious and very real problem trying to solve. But there is one more player in this tournament whose story deserves its own video entirely. Someone whose journey through these 5 games in Puerto Rico took a completely unexpected turn when the system around her changed, and who found a new and genuinely important role by the time the final buzzer sounded. I already made that video, and trust me, you do not want to skip it. It is right there on your screen.